Alrighty, welcome back everybody. We're doing the Windows Fundamentals 2 room now of the PreSecurity module. I've already gone ahead and started up my machine here, so go ahead and do the same. Takes a few minutes to get up and running. And we are talking about the system configuration, which is also msconfig. It's used for advanced troubleshooting, and it really helps diagnose startup issues. So I'm going to go ahead and launch that. So from the start menu, I'm going to type msconfig. And there you go. It says system configuration right there. Hit enter. And we are agreed with this window with several different tabs. We have a general tab, a boot tab, services, startup, and tools. So in the general tab, all that's really going over is it's showing what devices and services should load up upon boot. All right, so we have normal, diagnostic, and selective. Going into the boot tab, you can define different boot options for the OS. So like you can tell it to boot up into safe boot or an alternative shell, or you can boot from the network. You can tell it don't load up the GUI. You have log, things like that. In here, it just has a normal string saying it's Windows Server, the current OS is default OS. Going into the services tab, it's showing all the services that start, or I guess no, not necessarily that start, but all the services that are configured for the system, some of which are running, many are stopped, but it just depends what the setting is for your computer or server. Next up, we have startup. There's nothing on this VM for a startup. If we look over to the left in the actual lesson, it will say, hey, to manage startup items, use startup section in Task Manager. So it's recommending to use Task Manager to enable and disable startup items as opposed to system config. All right. Next, we're going into tools, and this is just various tools that we can run to configure the OS a little bit more, and it gives a little description of them. What's nice is it does give the command strings of what's going on here when we actually hit launch. So we have a couple questions. What is the name of the service that this system internals as a manufacturer? So out of all of our tabs, we have 5 tabs. Only one of them is in regards to services, so we're going to go over to services. And majority of these, the manufacturer is going to be Microsoft. We also have some Chrome stuff going, so it's from Google. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the manufacturer's tab right there. That way I can get reverse alphabetical. So we got some VMware stuff going, some from Amazon that's listed as unknown. And this one from System Internals is the PS Shutdown service. So PS Shutdown, submit, cool. Next it's going to ask who is the Windows license registered to. So we can go over to tools. None of these explicitly say who the Windows license is registered to, but the first tool that's over here is about Windows, and it displays Windows version information. So that might help us figure out who this license is assigned to. And right here, this product license, or this product is licensed under Microsoft Software License Terms to Windows User. Let's go ahead and do that, Windows User. So we can go ahead and shut that about Windows window down. Next is what is a command for Windows troubleshooting? So we remember on this tools tab down here, it will list commands, all right? And just the format of this, it's going to be looking for a command. I mean, C:. So let's figure out which one's about Windows troubleshooting. And we do have a tool name, Windows troubleshooting. So we're going to copy and paste this string right here, because it's C Windows Sys32 control.exe. So that control.exe is most likely going to be opening up whatever is running to actually get to the troubleshooting area. And then it says, for a question, what command will open up the control panel? And then it says answer is the name of the exe, not the full path. So it's not asking for this full path, it's asking for actual control panel, what launches that. And you can click through a couple of these and see what exes are being launched. So in the about windows, when we were in earlier, it's winver.exe. UAC is going to do user account control settings.exe. Windows troubleshooting launches control.exe, computer management comp management.msc, msinfo32.exe. So there's exes, there's MSCs. It's looking for exes, and as we go through, there's a couple of them that are going with this control.exe. And if you're familiar with the tabs and settings in control panel, you'll start to realize that, okay, that's probably launching control panel, so then get to like system properties from there. So we're going to go with control.exe. Next up, we are going to change UAC settings. So we talked about UAC settings in the last video. UAC settings can be changed or turned off entirely, which is definitely not recommended. You can move a slider around to see which settings will change, and it's just different levels of notification for the UAC prompt. And the question that we're supposed to answer is, what is a command to open up user account control settings? So we are still in system config. In tools, we'll see if there's something regarding UAC. And there's one. It says change UAC settings, and we have this string where it's in Windows sys32, and all that's asking for is the command, which is user account control settings.exe. We'll go ahead and do that. And if you want to go ahead and launch it, because we are admins, we can see what these have. So you can always notify, which it will always notify when apps try to install software and make changes to my computer, or when I make changes to a Windows setting. And this is recommended if you routinely install new software or visit unfamiliar websites. Next is the default, where you don't notify me when I make changes to Windows setting, and it's recommended if you use familiar apps or visit familiar websites. Next, it's don't notify me when I make changes to Windows settings, and then never, which is not recommended. So we're going to keep it on the default. Go ahead and hit cancel there. Moving on to computer management. So to do computer management, what's nice is when they, in this lesson, if you see it do this little bold thing, you can't just launch it. So you can do a search, computer management. You could also try to run either I think that's an MSC, honestly, but there's ways to get to it, all right? And what we have in computer management, we have 3 areas. We have system tools, storage services, and applications. System tools has some very important features if you're in the administration side of Windows, especially to help with troubleshooting. We have task scheduler, event viewer, share folders, local users and groups, which we went over last lesson, performance, and device manager. So starting off with task scheduler. Task scheduler, it's going to take a little bit to populate here, but you can create commands to run on a schedule. So if you remember back to the Linux fundamentals lesson, we went over, what was it, cron jobs, where they had that weird format, but that was Linux's way of allowing scheduled tasks to operate. This is Windows' way of doing it, and it's in Task Scheduler. So right now we have 0 running in the last 24 hours. We can break it down. So in the task schedule library here, we have 3 tasks that are scheduled. This Amazon EC2 launch is actually disabled, and its trigger is at system startup. We have a Google Update Task Machine Core, which is running. That has multiple triggers defined, and you can kind of look and say, okay, the settings of it, run whether the user is logged in or not, run with highest privileges, how it's configured. You can look in the trigger, and it is at a logon of a user and daily at 6:15 a.m. of every day. What it's doing is it is starting a program, which is in here, which is under Google Update, googleupdate.exe. And then we also have this other one down here, which is Google Update Task Machine UA, which is ready, and that runs at 6:15 every day. So you can set different triggers. They could just be a time. You could say when an action happens, such as user logging in or upon reboot. And to make those, you can go over here to create a basic task and such. All right. So that's Task Scheduler. Next up is Event Viewer. Event Viewer is very useful as this will allow you to read the logs that Windows by default is recording. So we have custom view Windows logs, application service logs. Like in Windows, we have application security setup system forward events. We're not going to dive into these in this lesson, but there's good information, especially if we're trying to track down what exactly happened. Like if there was a compromise, we might be able to see how the person logged in, what other additional actions that they did could be recorded in these logs over here. Um, Here are some good tables that are explaining different types of events using event logging with error, warning, information, success audit, and failure audit. Go ahead and read through those. All right. Um, there's also, I guess, if you go to Docs Microsoft, you're going to get either the same information or a little bit more. Here's some information about Windows logs and what those guys contain. So, application um, could be database application that might record a file error. Security is valid and invalid logon attempts. System is events logged by system components. This is all very generalized, okay? It contains a lot of entries they typically do on a machine that's running and actually doing things throughout a workday. Next up, we have shared folders where we can look at how the shares are configured, whether it's open files, current sessions, or shares. So if we click on shares on this server right here, we have admin, the C drive, IPC, and something called shared folder, and kind of leet speak there. And that folder path is actually, it's located on the desktop. So, oh, nope, you can't see it, but that is where it is located. It might be hidden, who knows. Next is we're going to talk about local users and groups. We went over that in the last lesson. Remember when we did the L user manager.msc and it launched this, where you could see the different accounts and whatnot. And then we also have performance, which shows us the performance monitor, which is kind of task manager on steroids. And it just shows you kind of what's going on with the system, what's hardware doing, is it getting bogged down, things like that. And then we have device manager as well, which is this guy. And this is going to show you all your hardware, whether or not something has a proper driver, whether it's disabled or enabled, things like that. So what monitors currently connected, network adapter, what ports, print queues, things like that. And we do have storage over here. It's going to talk about the hard drives. So we do have a good screenshot over here where it shows how the hard drive is partitioned. And you have a C drive and the reserve partitions over here. If you look, this is configured where the reserved area has 549 megabytes, while the C drive has 19.46 megabyte or gigabytes. I'm sorry, gigabytes. They're both NTFS drives, and this one is the boot drive and such. And you can see how much free space that they have, things like that. You can create partitions, you can merge them, shrink them, you can assign different drive letter. All right. Then we have services and applications. Okay, we went over services as well last time, but computer management kind of has it all. All right, it really does. One thing is down here as a little blurb about WMI, which is Windows Management Instruction, and that is a service. Um, it allows scripting languages like VB Script or PowerShell to manage Microsoft Windows personal computers and servers, both locally and remotely. Microsoft also provides a command line interface to WMI called Windows Management Instrumentation Command Line, or WMIC. And that tool did get deprecated. PowerShell is what's supposed to be used now. A lot of like off the shelf kind of management software over in the admin side, it might just be a whole bunch of these commands and scripts just chucked into a very nice GUI, and it makes administering things very easy. But you can do a lot of cool stuff with that, especially when you're talking about hardware and such. So let's go right into the question. So what is the command to open up computer management? So it is an MSC. So we're going to scroll right on up because at the beginning we did, let's see, we're going to use this. So comp management, then we're going to do .msc because it's asking for MSC. And that will bring up this. I know earlier all that we did was we said computer management and it popped up right there in the search bar. We can do this either in run or just right here, but if we do the same thing, there we go. And it launches. All right. And now we're trying to answer at what time every day does Google update task machine UA tasks configured to run? So if we remember over in task scheduler, that's where we can look at tasks that are scheduled. That's a very good name for it. And as it's loading, this one down here runs at 6:15 a.m. So let's do 6:15 space a.m. There we go. And the last question over here is what is the name of the hidden folder that is shared? So we're going to go into shared folders. We're going to open up shares, and that's going to be this one down here. So it's this little DeepSpeak shared folder. So there you go. Cool. Next, we're going over into system information. So we're looking at the tool called system information, and we should be able to launch it with msinfo32. msinfo32, system information pops up there. All right. And here we get to look at information about hardware resources, components, and the software environment. All right. And up at system summary, we get a very high level summary of our system. So we have the build number, or we have the OS name. So we're on Microsoft Windows Server 2019 standard. We're on this version, this build number. We have the system name over here, the system type, x64. We have the processor, BIOS version, such, memory, things like that. All right. Going into hardware resources. All right. So, oh, the TryHackMe doesn't even really go into that over here. That's kind of funny. So it says the information displayed in hardware resources is not for the average computer user. If you want to learn more about the section, click on this hyperlink. So it's talking about conflicts, DMAs, force hardware, IOs, RQs, and memory. Then under components, we have hardware device related areas. So multimedia, it could be the codecs, your CD-ROM, sound device, your display, input, so your keyboard, your mouse, your modem, network. So what's your adapter? All right. Port storage. Then we also have software environment, which this, let's see, mainly they're highlighting environmental variables and network connections. So environmental variables, we kind of touched on that in an earlier lesson, the previous one. Didn't really get too deep into it. So here we go, per Microsoft. Environment variables store information about the operating system environment. This information includes details such as operating system path, the number of processors used by the OS, and the location of temp folders. The environmental variables store data that is used by the operating system and other programs. For example, the Windows environment variable contains the locations of the Windows installation directory, and programs can query this value of this variable to determine where the Windows operating system files are located. Cool. So if we click on the environmental variables to see the assigned values for the virtual machine, that is all these guys over here. So our Windows variable is the normal system root one. All right. And then we have a couple user paths, temp paths, things like that. Let's see. This kind of looks a little bit different, but that's okay. So user variables for the admin, system variables. All right. And then it says towards the end, or towards the bottom of this utility, there's a search bar, give it a go. So we can search for things like IP address. So it's searching, And there we go. We found IP address and it says it is not available, which is fine. All right. So what is the command used to open system information? And it is in exe. We did it to open it up, and that is msinfo32.exe. All right. So msinfo32.exe. What is listed under the system name? So that's going to be up at the system summary. All right. We have a whole bunch of information here. But up here, right under system name, it should tell us the name of this server, which is THM TAC WinFun2. Aptly named, we're in the Windows Fundamentals 2 room. Now, under environmental variables, what is the value for a com spec? All right, so we're gonna go ahead and close that. We're in system, environment, environmental variables. Com spec is the name of the variable, and the value is this system root system32 command.exe. All right, so let's see if we can type this out. All right, system root wildcard system32 command.exe. There we go. Cool. So that's saying if a program or a script or something calls for the variable comspec, it is actually calling for this, and it's looks like it's running command prompt because cmd.exe opens up command prompt. Anyway, resource monitor. So we're continuing through the tools. Was a resource monitor, so it displays per progress in aggregate CPU, memory, disk, and networks usage information, in addition to providing details about which processes are using individual file handles and modules. Advanced filtering allows users to isolate the data related to one or more processes, either applications or services. You can start, stop, pause, or resume services, and you can close unresponsive applications from the user interface. It also includes a process analysis feature that can help identify deadlock processes and file locking conflicts so that the user can attempt to resolve the conflict instead for closing the application and potentially using data. So a good amount of information there. All right. So let's go ahead and open it up. So we're going to go over here and do resmon, run it, bam. So resource monitor. So we have 4 sections. We have overview that has the CPU, the disk, the network, and the memory. You get these cool little graphs of usage as well. So right off the bat, we can pretty quickly say, all right, the CPU is doing fine. It's down here, it's not all the way up here. The disk, it is going, then it drops, and it's going, then it drops, and it's going, then it drops, but it's not fully like at the top, so it's going fine. The network, you see it's spiking a little bit, but it's not so crazy. And then memory over here as well. So not a lot of faults, we're doing fine. Each one of these also has its own little dedicated tab up here, so CPU, while we can see the usage and the maximum frequency, as well as this information with the PIDs, the descriptions, the stats of them. We can click here, and it just breaks it down a little bit differently. So now we can see what services are going, the associated handles, the associated modules. So just a little bit more tailored information in each one of these tabs regarding whatever the topic is. So here we can look at memory. You know, we got 1050 megabytes in use, 991 available, and you can see the breakdown here, how much is hardware reserved, it's in use, what's modified, standby, what's free, what PID is using it, what process is. Same with the disk, okay? So not gonna go too deep into that. Although not capturing the images above, Resource Manager has a pane at the far right. This pane shows a graphical view real time, so that's this green area. All right. So what is the command to open up Resource Monitor? And it's in exe. So we did that right at the beginning, and that is resmon.exe. All right. So resmon.exe. So there's a pattern in this room. All right, to what they're kind of asking for. And I got another network issue. All right, let's see if this will go. Boom. All right, so the connection has been closed because it's taking too long. All right, next up, command prompt. All right, so while my network is trying to figure itself out, no worries, we're gonna keep on moving. So the command prompt can seem daunting at first, but it's not that bad. once you understand how to interact with it. Command prompt looks like terminal in Linux, all right? It's the black box that just lets you do whatever. So if we'll do command cmd dot exe, we can launch it. We can also just type in command and it will be up there. You can just do cmd and it's right there. Alrighty, so this is a command prompt and we're an administrator account, so it says administrator right here. If you're not, it won't say that. It's going to go over a couple commands here. So we have host name. That'll tell us, hey, that is the name of the computer, which was, we got asked that in the previous little area. We also have who am I, which if you recall from our Linux fundamentals, that says who am I logged in as, and we're logged in as administrator. We also have IP config, and that'll tell us information about our network address. So we have our IPv4, our subnet, and our default gateway, which you can do, much like man over in Linux to get a manual or the tac help, that we have /? And it will display your little help documentation. All right. So we can release, we can renew addresses, we can flush our DNS, we can use, let's see, /all. So there's IP configs, fun for networking stuff. It's not too crazy, so like it's not too crazy to interact with command prompts is what I'm trying to get at. And if you want to clear it, you can do CLS and all of it goes away. All right. Next command it wants to talk to is netstat. Boom. All right. So this they went with the help stuff. Did it actually ever hang on? All right, and if you ever want to just recall your previous commands, you can hit up on your keyboard. Oh, this is going so slow. You can do it, computer. You can do it. All right, so netstat, let's see what it's actually saying. It displays protocol statistics and current TCP IP network connections. All right, so these are our connections that we have. Cool. You have all these other flags that you can put in there. We also have the net command, okay, net user, things like that. So that is, it allows you to modify user accounts if it's net user. So like net user, you know, so net has a lot of commands. So you can do net accounts, computers, configs, all these things. Most of the time that I've ever seen used is with net user. So you can do net help user and it will show you what you can then do with net user. So net user specifically creates modified user accounts like computers when used without switches. It lists the user accounts for the computer. The user account information is stored within the user accounts database, but you can add users, you can delete them. If you're on a domain controller, you can go ahead and tell it, hey, domain. Also, some other workstations are allowed to do that. Let's see, you can do username because you could set up accounts, you can make them. So it's a very powerful command. It's kind of what I'm really trying to get at here, all right? So let's go ahead and answer these questions. In the system configuration, what is the full command for the Internet Protocol configuration, which is ipconfig? We are going to open up system configuration, where is it? Oh, that probably got closed since I had to restart it. That's all right. So let's do system configuration. We're going to tools and we want Internet Protocol configuration. And here it is. So it's C Windows sys32 command because we launched command prompt /k, then variable windir sys32 ipconfig.exe. All right, there we go. And for the ipconfig command, how do you show all detailed information? We kind of went over that kind of quick, but we'll go ahead and see all of it. And it's going to be this one right here, /all, where we display the full configuration information. So it looks like ipconfig/all. We get it submit. All right. Next is the registry editor. So the registry in Windows is the central hierarchical database used to store information necessary to configure the system for one or more users, applications, and hardware devices. So the registry contains information that Windows continually references during operations, like the profiles for each user, applications installed, and the types of documents they can make, property sheet setting for folders and application icons, what hardware exists, the ports being used, GPO policies, so user policy, computer policy, all that typically has a registry component. When you're administering Windows machines, you typically end up setting up settings in the registry, even though on the administrative side, it might be a GUI interface saying, hey, tell this device to update every 2 weeks, looking to the internet and not peer-to-peer type of deal. And there will be corresponding keys in the registry that will go ahead and set all those up. It might not be plain English and it might be really nested, but typically they're there. So to see that, we type in regedit. If I could spell, that would probably help. So regedit, and registry editor is this guy right here. It will open up. We have all these different folders, and as you break them down, there's a whole bunch. So local machine are machine-based settings. Current user is user-based settings. So you can see, you know, this doesn't really mean too much. But if you actually go in and maybe in system and then you keep drilling down, keep drilling down, keep drilling down, there might be security settings there. All right. So the registry, there's a warning here. It's for advanced computer users. Making changes to the registry can affect normal computer operations. You could break your you could break your Windows install. You could break it. But that's this is how Windows stores a lot of this information, and it is very useful to know what should be considered normal and what shouldn't, and know when you're looking through logs what normal processes are doing in regards to the registry, because malware might be setting up files somewhere and then adding in reg keys as well. All right, so the reg key is, or I'm sorry, the registry, even though it's advanced, it is something that you're going to see a lot in logs as just normal computer operations. It will constantly reference the registry, or it might be making changes to the registry. And you don't want to see an alert, like, if you're in SOC and you see an alert and you say, oh no, the registry got edited, it must be a bad guy, when it turns out Windows Update just did it. All right. So what is the command to open up the registry editor? It's an exe, much like all these other ones. We're going along with this pattern. It's going to be regedit.exe. Wait, did I spell that right? Nope, I am mistaken. What is it? Regedit 32.exe. Nope, I cannot do this right now. All right, so let's open up services. Nope, system config. That's the one. There we go. Let's look at tools. Let's look for registry editor. Here we go. Regedt. There we go. So that one did not go according to all the rest, and that happens, all right? But through this lesson, we know where to look, and that's in system configuration tools, all right? Bam. And let's see what a hint would have said. Refer to the command in msconfig. Okay, so we did that. Next, we're at the conclusion. So recall that tasks covered in this room were some of the tools that can launch from msconfig. That's system configuration over here. Throughout the room, command shortcuts were shared for the utilities. This means you don't have to launch msconfig to run them. Many of these can be found from the start menu. Some of them are found in Windows admin tools, some of them are in Windows system. Some of the tools listed in msconfig that weren't mentioned in this room were either covered in Windows Fundamental 1 or left for you to explore on your own. We're going to go ahead and hit complete. We're going to go ahead and terminate this machine. And I do recommend, if you have time, mess around. Not everyone has access to like Windows Server. It's very similar in function to a normal Windows operating system, but getting your hands dirty, we'll always recommend going for that. All right. So we have completed the room. Thank you all for watching me go through that, struggling a little bit through it. We have one more video in the pre-security module, so hopefully we'll be wrapping that up soon. Wish you all the best. All right. Thank you.